I guess I'm going to record it. There we go. I guess it's recording.
Woohoo!
How's that?
That was
So,
me.
well, very good. I don't know where it's going to be saved to, but we'll here anyway. All right. There are still people joining. It's 7 o'clock. We only have so much time, so I don't want to take all of your time. Fortunately, we're only covering a few butterflies tonight, so holy cow. Let's see here. Okay, so admit. Let's see. Here we go. There we go. Okay. It looks like we've got everybody. All right. Well, first of all, this idea came into my head because I haven't taught anything for the last 6 months and I'm going crazy not doing it. So, plus we are getting ready to start our, gee whiz, 12th, 13th year of butterfly surveys, bi-monthly butterfly surveys at Guadalupe River State Park. Most of those years official. Um, and I thought, well, it'd be great to just do a refresher on all of the different butterflies that we likely encounter when we do those surveys at Guadalupe River. So each month for the next 6 months, now through I think May or June, I'm going to cover one group of butterflies, just the ones that are going to be the most common or the ones that we typically encounter on our survey. So I'm not going to try to cover everything across the state. If any of you are, do butterfly surveys down in San Antonio area, it's possible you'll see a few different species down there than we typically get at Guadalupe. Um, and so just keep that in mind. So I'm going through the ones that we are likely to encounter. And the reason I wanted to do this is because a lot of you that are on this have been doing these surveys with me since we began, or at least some of you have. And I know there are other surveys being done by other master naturalist groups down at Bracken or out in New Braunfels or elsewhere. So when Robert Doyle suggested that we get Alamo to sign on, Jeanette was nice enough to go, yeah, let's do that. So, and I saw in the messages that this time is approved for training time too for both Alamo and Lindheimer chapters. So, if you have, um, we have a small enough group right now. We've got 22 people in here. Um, And so if you have a question as we go through it, go ahead and unmute and then ask that question. You don't have to try to raise your hand since I'm just trying to monitor this on my own. And we'll try to answer the question in real time. Hopefully this will be of value to you and help you with our survey work here when we do it at the park or wherever you happen to be doing it. So I've got somebody else coming in. It is being apparently recorded, so that's good. Um, and we'll get that taken care of. All right. So hopefully everybody can see the screen right here. Again, we're gonna cover the swallowtails. So let's go ahead and jump in here. Get this thing rolling. Let's see here. I want to minimize that screen. Here we go. Hang on. I need three screens, not just two, I guess. Hopefully I'll get a note if somebody else comes in. All right. Well, first of all, Papilionidae are the swallowtails. They are our largest butterflies. Most have tails on their hind wing. Although I will say to you that there are times when the tails wear off or are bitten off if a butterfly is attacked by a potential predator. So yeah, you just need to keep that in mind. And there are, of course, examples of swallowtails that don't have those extra long tails on their hind wings. So just keep that in mind. Many have caterpillars that resemble bird droppings, at least early in their development, usually in the first, second, or third. By the time they get larger, they lose that. Depending on the species, they lose that and become green with big false eyeballs. We'll show you a couple of examples of that tonight. They also have this gland called an osmeterium for chemical defense. We'll go into that just a little bit more because it's kind of neat to see when you find a caterpillar. Several species exhibit mimicry, all of them focused on one particular swallowtail that is very toxic. In fact, it's thought to be more toxic than even the monarch butterfly. Of course, feeds on milkweed. All species that I could find any research on overwinter as a chrysalis. And then that's why we start seeing a few, once it starts getting the warm weather, we'll start seeing adults pop up of swallowtails right off the bat because they are already ready to go. They just need the warmer temperatures to burst out of that chrysalis. I went to iNaturalist and also Pomona meaning the Butterflies and Moths of North America website. iNaturalist has photographic records of 17 species in Texas. Pomona has records of 21 species in their webpage. We will cover 5 species here tonight. A lot of those butterflies, those swallowtails, they're either going to be northern and eastern, like the zebra swallowtail, which is out of our area, or they're going to be ones that are way down in the valley that are extraordinarily rare. Occasionally, they come across from the Rio Grande. And by the way, that November, December is the best time to go down there and see some of those rare ones that show up. But a lot of those may only show up once every few years. So the ones that we're going to cover today are the ones you're probably going to be the most familiar with. But even with those 5 species, there is the potential for ID challenges. So we want to talk about that. But before we get to the actual butterflies, here's this thing about the osmeterium. This is a paired gland, you can see. It's Y-shaped um, that everts or comes out of the above the head of the swallowtail, is coated with chemicals that have at least 2 kinds of acids that are produced by the caterpillars. That is thought to ward off potential predators by tasting bad and smelling bad. Some of them produce different chemicals, but a lot of them are types of acids. The forked part of that, especially in this photograph on the right side, is real noticeable. Not only do you have these long extensions here that are everted, you also have those fake eyeballs. So that those fake eyeballs are thought to resemble the eyeballs of a snake, for example. And then if that thing, that osmeterium comes out, then that could potentially try to resemble a forked tongue of a snake. So from scale wise, you could see that would make sense. The other thing that's kind of interesting about these caterpillars, you'll notice the heads here, they raise up their body to bring these out, but when they go back down to rest, their head is way underneath. So they're protected by this hard outer cuticle exoskeleton of their body, along with this stink gland. And trust me when I say it stinks, because I've touched it before and smelled it close up, and it's a chemical that lasts on your fingers for a little while. Actually stains your fingers. The other thing I wanted to mention, of course, going to mimicry, the butterfly that most of the swallowtails try to mimic, and not even all swallowtails, other butterflies, is the pipevine. The pipevine, as you may already know, feeds on a group of plants called pipevines. Um, they have toxins in them that make them very toxic. As I mentioned, even more so than the monarch butterfly. It's reported. So you can see here's an example. Here's a female black phased tiger swallowtail trying to resemble the pipevine. The female, in particular, of the black swallowtail has that bluish stain that you can see in here. So there's a little mimicry there. And even a butterfly that's not a swallowtail, called the red spotted purple, is thought to try to mimic the pipevine as well. So even a different family butterfly is trying to take advantage of this mimicry. And just to show you on the underside of the wings, the similarities are still there. You can see that the pipevine has this comma, or backwards C, if you will, of orange spots. You can see the orange and kind of yellow spots on the tiger female black phase. You can see the orange spots on the red spotted purple, and a little bit harder to see, but the black here. Um, is has got kind of mostly yellow, but a little bit of orange as well, plus that orange spot down there. So again, pretty good examples of mimicry. By the way, just to kind of give this out to you, because it's a pretty good photograph demonstrating this, this tiger swallowtail, of course, they have those stripes. You're going to see that in a little bit. If you ever encounter a big black swallowtail that clearly looks bigger than typical pipe vine or a black swallowtail, watch for this black line that's going down here, that tiger stripe. If the wings are folded up like this, you can readily see that, and that's a hint that this is actually a tiger swallowtail. I should also mention that I've seen this up north. What's interesting is I've seen this up north where pipe vines are actually fairly rare. But I have encountered this down at Cibolo Nature Center. Photographed one on the trail either last summer or the summer before that. So this does occur around here. It's more typical where you have the pipevine swallowtail, which makes some sense. Okay. All right. So that's the mimicry aspects of where they try to steal the colors of the pipevine swallowtail. We'll start with the pipevine swallowtail. The males and females look a little bit different, as you can see here. The males, this one right here, have all of this blue. It varies, especially with age. As these butterflies age, they lose scales and they become paler as they go along. But the male has this beautiful blue iridescence when it's fresh. The females typically are darker. They have yellow stripes or yellow spots along the edge of the hind wing and the forewing, but they lack most of the iridescence. This one's probably a little bit older, so it lacks any iridescence, or the lighting might be a little bad. They might have a little bit of iridescence down here at the base of near the base of the hind wing, but certainly not like the male pipe vine. Again, the host plants are in the pipe vine family, including swanflower. So one of the characteristics that can help you identify this butterfly is you often see a large black swallowtail cruising low over the ground, touching different plants as they go along the ground. And that's a good clue often that is a female pipevine looking for a place to lay eggs, because the plant pipevine, as I'll show you in a second, the leaves look very much like grass. So watch for that when you're doing a survey. If you're seeing a dark butterfly, black swallowtails, which can look a lot like this, typically they're of course looking for places to lay eggs, but their behavior is different. You don't see that quite like you do with the pipevine. So keep that in mind. In terms of the number of broods, and this is kind of a clue as to how long during the calendar year you might see this butterfly, it's possible to see it here in our area 12 months out of the year. So they may have as many as 4, maybe even 5 broods over the course of the entire 12-month series or year. That actually probably represents the most abundant in terms of number of broods of any of the swallowtails that we have here in Texas. Here is the hind wing. When the wings are folded again, you'll notice very, very bright orange, here it looks like a C, because it's the way it's designed, but kind of a arc, if you will, but a single arc of orange spots on the hind wing. The amount of blue might indicate that this is probably a male, but that's a good clue. If you see where the circle has been completed, or it looks like there are 2 rows of those orange spots, chances are you're looking at the black swallowtail. So we'll put that up. We'll show those comparisons here in just a few moments. Now, again, I mentioned earlier that as they age, they kind of become paler as they lose scales. This is not uncommon late in a hatch. When the females are getting older, they've lost a lot of their scales, overscaling. So what you'll see is as they're flying around, it almost looks like the outer parts of their hind wings are gray, really gray. And the entire body can be very gray. Most of these adults don't live more than a few weeks. So you've got to keep that in mind. They age pretty quickly. They're flying around a lot, obviously. They're being attacked. They're fighting with each other. All kinds of things can happen. So they're going to age out. And this grayish appearance, a lot of these are my observations. So keep that in mind too. but I've used this characteristic to kind of help me nail down this guy as a female. And even in this picture, even though it's a little hard to see, there's that little comma or circle of half circle of spots underneath. But notice they're not bright orange; they're yellowed out as they've lost a lot of that overscaling. So keep that in mind. Now, just for a little natural history on this one, because this is such a common butterfly, when they lay eggs, typical of most butterflies, they're going to lay their eggs oftentimes try to lay them on the underside of the leaf. And this is kind of the posture that they're going to use. They're going to land on the ground near the ground again. And they're going to take their and curl their abdomen up and underneath the leaf to deposit their eggs. It's really hard to see here. You'd have to look really close, but this one's actually laying an egg. And pipeline swallowtails, unlike a lot of swallowtails, they lay in small clusters. Eggs are very orange. I've seen as many as 12 in a cluster, but they could potentially lay those eggs in a fairly nice sized cluster. Um, the other thing that's interesting is this pipevine is not a big plant. Here's the flower of it, by the way. So if you see them flying around where you're doing a survey, look for the flower. If you're familiar with Jack in the Pulpit, it looks a little bit like Jack in the Pulpit. I grew up north, so that's why I'm familiar with that. But it has this spathe and spadix sort of arrangement, really beautiful little flower. But the leaves look like grass, except they're thicker. So they're not that thin blade. They're a little bit thicker. But if you see a butterfly doing this, chances are somewhere in your yard or your survey area, you've got pipevine or Chuan flower blooming there. The other thing that I learned through attending a talk many years ago with one of the Audubon groups down in San Antonio is it takes about 25 of these plants to feed and raise up one pipevine swallowtail. So if they're going to lay a cluster of eggs, they must be, I don't know if they kind of analyze where there's a big pile of them, but they need a lot of pipevine to raise up all those eggs and families. The other thing that's curious, which you'll see out in the field, and we've seen this on and off, is that the color of the caterpillar varies with the temperature. When the temperatures are cooler in the springtime, typically you see the caterpillars that are mostly black to kind of dark purple with those orange little points. And when the temperatures start to get above an average of 85 degrees Fahrenheit, when they molt, they become orange like this, so they can radiate off heat or not absorb as much heat. They need that dark color to absorb heat in the springtime. This was proven by taking the researchers that proved this actually took caterpillars from Tennessee, I think, or Kentucky, where they go through those different color phases and took them out to California, where the pipevine is, where the pipevines don't change color because of the temperature, and they actually could see them change color or change color and stay in that color. And then when they took the ones from California out to the east, they then started changing color with the temperature variations. So pretty interesting characteristic. The other behavior that will tell you pipevines are in the area, because remember on our surveys, we do look for caterpillars and we try to account for those caterpillars. That's why it's important to show you this. On a hot day, if it's 90 plus, a lot of times, and in the summertime it does get that, you'll often see these swallowtail caterpillars high on grass stems. They're not eating the grass stem, they're avoiding the heat down at the ground. And my understanding is that on the ground, if you put a thermometer down there on a 90 or 95 degree day, it's going to be a lot hotter there on the ground than it is up above the ground, even 12, 14 inches. So the idea is that these guys go up here, they have the chemical defenses, right? And they have the osmoteria to protect themselves. So they go up higher to avoid some of that excessive heat. And so you'll see that with both of these color phases, them doing that on hot days. Okay, now, just to kind of give you, I wanted to give you we're going to go into the pipevines or the black swallowtail next, but I wanted to kind of give you the range extension here. You can see that the pipevine and the black overlap greatly. And certainly in Texas, they're overlapping completely. The pipevine tends to be a little bit more southern in its distribution, and when you get to the center part of the state, a little bit northern, go farther north in California when you get out to the western part of the state. But a lot of overlap there, and thus you can understand why that mimicry has arisen between the black and the pipevine. So here is the black swallowtail, male and female, male on the left, female on the right. You'll notice the male typically has a broader band of yellow above the blue, the beautiful blue spots in the lower part of the hind wing. You also notice, as I mentioned, the tails fall off. Here's two different butterflies, and each one's missing a tail. I just now noticed that. So they do lose those tails, so that can throw you off a little bit. The female tends to be a little blacker. The yellow doesn't seem to be quite as bright. They're similar in size and all of that. They feed on the members in the parsley family, Umbelliferae, as well as another plant family that includes a little plant called Dutchman's breeches, which is a small plant that grows in the spring and early summer before it kind of disappears until fall. It smells very citrusy. It's in the citrus family. And very common. We find that out at the park. So when we find patches of Dutchman's breeches, we should definitely be watching for caterpillars again to document that. So again, here's your male-female comparison. I noticed that one of the observations that I make when I've been doing these surveys for so long is how butterflies fly. And I mentioned that the female pipevines are always, a lot of times, are very close to the ground, seem to be touching, they're scratching leaves with their feet as they try to figure out if it's a grass or if it's pipevine or something else. These guys typically fly a little bit stronger, a little bit higher, a little bit farther and faster. They're by comparison to the pipevine. So the pipevine to me is kind of a lingerer, where these guys seem to get up and go where they need to go to find their plants, because these plants of these guys are going to be a little more widely distributed. Oh, I wanted to go back one thing. You'll notice I also noticed the number of broods 3+. In the case of the pipelines or the blacks that we see at the park, we don't see nearly as many of these as we do pipevines. And we typically see them. We've surveyed 5 different locations in the park, and typically we only see them in 1 or 2 of those locations with any regularity. So it may be a host plant, where you can find the host plants. You're going to drive where you see those butterflies. So keep that in mind. Here, of course, is the butterfly with the wings folded. Now you'll notice here, this has got that orange band that actually completes and goes. It's kind of a goofy looking circle, but a complete circle of orange with yellow in these dots that go around in here, instead of just that one C or half circle. And then again, here's the caterpillar. This is the plant that it's nectaring on, Dutchman's breeches. And you can see the osmeterium right here that's that looks like it's starting to come out. I probably touched that thing and then took a picture of it or something like that. Very different looking, but on the plant that it's feeding, pretty well camouflaged. Again, for identification of the adult, look for this odd looking complete circle of orange spots. So if we take a look at these two and compare the male to the male pipevine to the male black swallowtail, really there's not a whole lot. That's not hard to tell apart right there. When you get to the females, it's a little bit trickier. But again, watching for the behavior of the butterfly. Again, these guys are going to have typically more blue. They're going to have more of that extra spot row of white, yellow spots, even though those yellow spots are going to be fainter than on the male, it's still going to be present. So again, those are some of the differences between the males and the females of the black versus the pipevine swallowtail to watch for. And again, I already mentioned the way they fly, and that's pretty arbitrary, I know. But when you watch them enough, and I see Ed is on there, I think Ed would probably agree with me. He's seen a few butterflies in a day. That once you really start seeing the butterflies, you can start noticing some flight differences. Here we go on the side view again. you've got this half circle right here of dark orange, and here you've got this more of a complete pattern down here on the underside of the black swallowtail. So yeah, go ahead. Ed.
No, I'm okay. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So anyway, you can again when you see them side by side, it's not hard to tell them apart. It's when you see them with only one of them that sometimes you can be confused. So it's always good to just review those things, those characteristics in your field guide before you go out and do that survey, just to help us out. It's real easy, and I've been guilty of this. It's real easy when you're out surveying to make assumptions on what you think you're seeing. Um, and sometimes we're wrong on those assumptions. So we need to be very careful with that. I got a little bit of a lesson to that today on that on a rare butterfly. And I thought it was one thing, and I was in my excitement to say that it was one thing, it turned out it was something else. So we can all learn regardless of how long we've been doing this kind of work. Just to kind of show you caterpillars of these guys, I mentioned earlier that the caterpillars change. So here's the caterpillar that is the first or second, maybe third instar of a swallowtail. Looks like a bird dropping. And then again, as they age, you're going to start to see these false eyeballs that kind of form here that show might frighten off a potential predator. Um, the other thing that's interesting to note, and in doing this, putting this together, I've done a lot of research as to why these guys, a lot of caterpillars, they hide under the leaves during the day or on the stems during the day. But you'll notice that these butterflies in these pictures that were taken are actually resting on top of the leaf. Broad daylight, apparently no worries about what they're doing. You'll also notice that this one is facing the stem of the leaf, which is down here. This one's facing the stem of the leaf down here. And a gentleman, just an honest to goodness, great naturalist, that I read all of his books. Um, he was doing some observations of swallowtails and wondering when they feed because he would only see them sitting on the leaf every time he went out. And if you'll notice on this picture in particular, you can see kind of a silvery sort of covering on that leaf. You can see it here as well. And even down here on this picture, you can kind of see that. That's webbing. And apparently, what a lot of these swallowtails do, they hide in plain sight. Um, and they make this mat of silk, and then they use their prolegs and their feet, the claws on their feet and prolegs to latch onto this, and that's how they hold on during the day. And then every couple of hours, they will wander off, go feed, not on the leaf they're resting on, they'll go feed, and then
Yeah.
they'll come back after 5 or 10 minutes, reposition themselves in this position. And then they will, he said, he noted that they would move their abdomen back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And that's where they were laying down the silk and getting locked into that silk as a pad, a kind of a landing pad. So if the next time you find swallowtails, and I can't wait to do this next spring, I'm going to start doing that observation. And the other thing is they feed all throughout the day and the night. They're not just a daytime feeder. So pretty interesting behaviors on that. That's kind of a little aside. This is why I need more than 40 minutes on these presentations. I wanted to show you the next two butterflies we're going to talk about are the eastern tiger and the two-tailed swallowtail. Um, and if you'll notice the distribution, eastern tiger is basically the eastern half of the country almost entirely. The two-tailed is scattered in the western part, but it's kind of scattered all over the western half of the United States. But if you'll notice in Texas, there is kind of a zone of overlap there. And they're not super common here, but they are here. So it's worth knowing about these two and how to learn and learning how to distinguish between the two species. We'll start with the eastern tiger swallowtail, which is going to be of the two the most common that we have around here. Again, here's an example. Here's a tail here, and it's missing its long tail on this side. So again, another example. They don't always have all their tails. Tiger swallowtail is pretty easy to identify. It's huge. It's bright yellow with those black tiger stripes. It's outlined on the outer edge with black. Just an absolutely beautiful butterfly. It is a high flying butterfly. This is one that a lot of times we see go over us, and we have to look really carefully as to whether it's whether it's a two-tailed or a tiger. The second tail, by the way, and I'll show you a slide comparing the two. The second tail they refer to is this one right here. So here's the primary tail. Here's the second one, and on a two-tail, this would be longer. This is barely a tail here compared with this one. The other thing that I like to note on these guys, the row of yellow dots on the outer edge of the wings is not nearly as developed in the tiger swallowtail typically, as you will notice that it is on the two-tailed swallowtail. Between the two-tailed is larger than the tiger swallowtail, but unless you're side by side, a lot of times you can't really tell that. They do feed on a wide variety of trees and shrubs, including cottonwood and cherry trees. Um, so they're everywhere. And there's probably three broods down here in the south. Farther north, there are probably only two broods. But again, a very beautiful, very strong flying. Oftentimes you see it going over the treetops or through the treetops. So let's look at this tailed situation. So again, here's the two-tailed. You'll notice they've got both pairs have the long tails that we typically associate with swallowtail. But you'll notice the inner tail here on the two-tailed is significantly longer than this. Now you may be going, how in the heck are we supposed to be able to see that? And the answer is get a really good look, or otherwise it's kind of tough. Um, and again, they can be missing those tails, but that's where the two-tailed, so two tails on each hind wing versus the one long tail right here on the eastern tiger. So again, I'm not saying that that's easy to see, but it's what I look for is to try to see if I can see that, especially if the butterfly's nectaring. The other challenge with these butterflies, these two in particular, the black swallowtail does this some as well, probably not as much. But when they're nectaring, a lot of times their wings are flapping the entire time, which again makes it really challenging to figure out which one of the two species you have. That's why when we do our surveys, we have people with cameras to try to capture at least as many pictures as we can so we can start to take a closer look at what we might have. Now, the swallowtail mimicry, I've already talked about that, so I won't spend much time, but this is a picture I took in Iowa years ago. Here's a female mating with a male. Again, you can see the tiger stripe on the hind wing there. It kind of gives this away. But again, proof that that will happen. Other pipevine mimics, by the way, the black swallowtail I mentioned, spicebush, and then also the Ozark swallowtail is another example that tries to mimic this guy. And just to kind of show you the black-faced tiger and how similar it is to a black swallowtail. First of all, the tiger is going to be bigger. It's a big butterfly. Once you get used to looking at tigers and blacks, you'll notice the size difference. Here is, and this is, the quality of this picture is terrible because I took this up facing the sun. It's the only chance I got a picture of it at Cibolo a couple of years ago, and I wanted to capture something. You'll notice that the spot pattern on the underside of the tiger, the black tiger, is not nearly as well developed as you see it here on the regular black swallowtail. And even this row of dots is not quite as prominent as well. So there are differences. You can faintly see the tiger stripe right through here if you look really close. Again, not easy to do, but worth watching for when we're out there and we're seeing those dark swallowtails. Again, the size, and it's a strong flyer, and the size of it gives away some initial clues that it might be that. All right, so that's the pipevine and the two-tailed and the giant swallowtail. Then we're going to spend the rest of the time mostly talking about the giant swallowtail because scientists have really screwed us up here. There has, I wanted a reaction from somebody. I got one.
Yes, of
Um,
course.
The giant swallowtail used to be known as Papilio cresfontes. It's now been split into two species, the eastern and the western. The good thing about them both is that they feed on members of the citrus family, including wafer ash and toothache tree. They will have three or more broods during the season in our part of the neck of the woods. Um, And that is where so those are the similar things. The rest of it is massively confusing. And so we're going to show you why that is. First of all, though, I just wanted to show you the life stages of this particular species. The other species, when they get older, the of the tiger and the two-tail, they develop those fake eyeballs and turn green. In the case of the giant swallowtail, first of all, they lay this green egg singly, not in clusters. When they're young, they look like a bird dropping, and when they get old, they look like a bird dropping. So they tend to, and then notice where it's resting during the day right here instead of here. As they age, I've seen them here, and I don't know if they're getting ready to make a chrysalis there or not, but I've seen this more than once where they're on the actual stem, and this happens to be a toothache tree. You can see through the spines. So this is a diagram from the paper that is in Zookeys. It was published in 2014, so it's been going on for a while. There is there's a group of folks, Nick Gritchen, and several other researchers have been going through the genetics of butterflies in North America, and they are separating things right and left. Every time I turn around, the butterfly's been changed into two species or three species or something, and they're using it with genetics, doing it by genetics. Um, and so a lot of these times the genetics are 3% or 2.7% difference, and I don't know what that means because I'm not a geneticist, but apparently to them it's enough to separate them into separate species. So when we talk about the giant swallowtail, and by the way, where we are situated in Texas makes it the worst possible situation because that's where the zone of overlap is. So most of our swallowtails, if you look at them, get really good pictures, and you really study them, you'll find characteristics of both butterflies um, on every specimen. So it's frustrating. But Rumico, which is the western of the two, there are several characteristics you look for. Okay. And so we're just going to go through them really quickly. First of all, there's this spot up here. You can see that the black circle inside that yellow spot typically is smaller than it is on the western. So this is the eastern. It's typically smaller, so you see more yellow surrounding that little bit of black there, whereas this one's almost cut in half sometimes, or takes up more than even half of that cell spot. If you look at these dots, these spots right here, and compare them to the eastern over here, notice that these are much larger and typically will have, instead of just three, they go all the way up the outer edge, whereas these are smaller and becomes very black here. So number two characteristic is the hardest one, probably one of the hardest ones to see. The at the where these It's kind of crenate, so it's making these little loops, and at the base of these where the vein comes in, it's very yellow in these little valleys. Each one of these valleys don't have as much yellow, if any at all. But again, it's variable. You wouldn't want to use that all the time as a characteristic. Then we come down to the tail. The tail is described as thinner on the western, where it's more spatula shaped or thicker. On the eastern, again, variable. Then you have the abdomen right here. The abdomen of the western has more yellow than black, whereas you notice this has got more black, except when it doesn't. I know some of you are spinning in your heads right now. Um, then there is the underside of the wing here, and the pattern that you see right here. On the western, theoretically, if you got a picture of the underside of the wing, you'd be able to basically draw a straight line along the leading edge of those spots. Whereas here on the eastern, you got to imagine again. Here's the leading edge here going in this direction, and then these three stick way out here, and so this is the divider right here. So if that's not a straight line, that's an indication that you might have eastern. All of these characteristics I have found, and I'm going to show you examples because this is the only way to know or not know. Um, The characteristics that's supposed to be the most reliable, according to the research paper, is on the head and thorax. On the western, there's supposed to be a pretty consistent line, two lines of yellow that go from the top of the head all the way to the through the first half of the thorax. Whereas on the eastern, if there's any yellow there at all, there's a small row of spots. So not really noticeable.
Hmm.
Okay. Now that you've learned all this, are you ready for some confusion? First of all, before we get to that confusion, this is some genetic testing that they did, and I'm not going to try to interpret it, but basically the Eastern group, and I don't know why I got two R's there. Eastern group specimens have pale yellow spots on the head, patagia, and thorax. Southwestern species have the continuous yellow stripes. That's what I wanted to show, and that's what this is showing here. These are the rumicos with the spots. These are the Cresfontes, the western, that have the more consistent yellow lines on the as I described. Southwestern specimens, which is the western swallowtail, have narrower, less scalloped wings, longer, more slender hind wing tails, and exhibit statistical difference in details of wing patterns, mostly on the ventral hind wing. The two populations are allopatric or separated except for a narrow overlap zone in central Texas. And this one is showing, this is from central Texas, and you'll see there's rumicos up here, there's Cresfontes down here, but there's little bits of overlap, and I'll show you more proof of that. By the way, right now, as iNaturalist has divided it up, there's your range maps. And you can see we are in the bullseye of confusion when it comes to these two species. And there is the actual bullseye that shows
Oh
the
my.
problem that we have. The one advantage you have, if you're down here in the valley, chances are everything you're looking at in the valley is going to be the western. But if you're in the San Antonio area or the Boerne area, chances are you can have either one of them. Okay. And here's more visual proof. All the red, if it's all red, those are westerns. The blues are easterns. And there's the zone of overlap up here. So again, if you go out along the Rio Grande, you'll notice everything seems to be western. But once you're up in the Austin area to San Antonio, even down to the coast, and even into East Texas, parts of East Texas, there's going to be zones of overlap, which means sometimes you just have to say great giant swallowtail and leave it at that.
Craig, are they hybridizing?
Well, that's what that's if it were me, I would say, yeah, it's a hybrid zone that we're in. And the reason I say that, I don't know if anybody specifically looked at that, other than in our area, each butterfly, and I'm going to show you several images that I've taken. Each one has characteristics of both species.
Okay.
And this is the one where I think they said there was a 3% difference in their genetics. And that doesn't sound like a very big difference to turn them into different species, but again, I'm not a geneticist. If you ever see a giant swallowtail in this position, you're not going to identify it. Okay. It's a cool looking picture, but it's not going to ever, the only thing it's going to tell you is that it's a giant swallowtail. Lots of yellow spots on a black background underneath. And that's all you can tell. You can't see the upper wing. The leaves are blocking that lower area down here. The tails aren't really obvious. The streaky or the spotting on the back of the thorax isn't obvious. So this is just a giant swallowtail. All right, so here we have an example, a real example that we took at Guadalupe a couple of years ago. If we start looking at the characteristics, if we start up here, small black spot, okay, leans towards eastern. Now we don't have the advantage of looking at this right here, so we can't guess what we're looking at here, other than it's lit up pretty nicely right through here. There's another, this is the underside, there's a yellow dot up here. But again, I can't tell anything from that, so I can't use that characteristic. Then I come down here, and if I were going to draw that imaginary line, well, it's kind of hard to tell. These three kind of line up. These don't seem to line up at quite as well. So again, kind of an overlap zone. Is this thin and narrow, or is that more spatula shaped? I'd call that spatula shaped, which would lean towards Crespontes. Now, here's the kicker. Here's where there's very little black from the side view of the abdomen. That to me would lean towards Western. Then we have this yellow stripe right here on the thorax. That would lean towards Western. So, what do you want to call it?
Giant swallowtail.
It's a tough one. It's going to be giant swallowtail.
Hey, Craig.
Yes.
So in the past, we've only just called them giant, right? We have not tried to.
And we're not,
We're not going to.
No, I took a lot of the pictures that we've put up there on iNaturalist to try to figure it out, and I just can't come to a solid conclusion.
And so if I am going to photograph it, the best way would try to get the wings open is your
I
best.
get wings open. I would get every picture we can get
Well,
because
yeah,
the more, you know, again, yeah, but it probably in our area, it's not going to matter. How's that sound?
Okay.
All right, here's another, what I put down, Eastern Giant. Well, let's see. Small spot there. Seems like there's more black here than that previous picture. I only see a tiny little yellow dot right there. I don't see a dark or a significant yellow line there. These are so faded and worn, it's hard to get any read off of that. If we look at this characteristic here, we really can't do much with this either because the wing is not held right. And it's missing half of or a quarter of its wing right here. So there's no way to measure that. So again, I can say all day long this is an Eastern because it doesn't have a line here. But again, probably not enough information for us to make a distinct decision. I hate to say it. Here's a giant swallowtail. Here's a beautiful specimen right here. You'd think, okay, here we go. We start looking at the characteristics. Instead of having a lot of black here, it only has a little bit of black here. It does only have these three dots with barely anything here, although there's a hint, but primarily only the three, although they're pretty good sized if we look at them. Okay. Although you'll notice that one of the things, this is where you start letting your imagination run wild. The gap between here and here, here and here and here and here looks like a better match for a Western right there than it does an Eastern. Okay. Again, we're drawing for straws here. This looks more narrow on this one tail, but the other tail's missing. Now, the other characteristic I mentioned was the yellow along this margin here. This says yellow, 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 yellow. That's an Eastern characteristic. The abdomen looks more like an Eastern with more black, although it's judgmental. But here's that Western characteristic of the yellow lines. I would lean in this case towards Western, but I can't. I can't take a sample of its genetics. Only time will tell to see if this becomes the leading characteristic
Is it
that helps us
possible to
separate
have a
these.
hybrid?
Oh yeah, I think we live in a zone of hybrids. And that's why in the hill country, in this part of central Texas along the I-35 corridor, good luck. And it's just, there are some people that always want to put down a species. They don't want to have a subspecies. They don't want to, they want to know. Sometimes what I'm trying to prove to you here, it's just hard to know. So be happy with being able to say it's a giant swallowtail. When you put it on iNaturalist, somebody's going to come in and try to say it's an Eastern or a Western. I'm not willing to take those guesses right now. Let's just say that way. Here's again another example. Has the lines right here, they're not quite as connected as the previous one was. The black amount of black, similar. Now, I will tell you that this is taken at the National Butterfly Center in November. Okay, that is in the valley. If I'm going based on the research that was shown, which species should this be?
Western.
Western. And it has a characteristic of a Western there, a characteristic of a Western here. The spot pattern, I think, is too variable. I don't think you can count that. There isn't much yellow right in here, which is good. That's a sign that this is probably a Western. This is long and narrow versus spatula shaped. So there are some characteristics here that would tell me that this is a Western. And location in this particular example may make this a Western. But again, when I put it in iNaturalist, I don't think I put it as a Western. Here's another example. Very little yellow or black here on the abdomen, very distinct white stripes on the thorax and the top of the head. Um, uh, 3 spots, kind of fades out, but again, we got a lot of pieces missing on this particular specimen. I would lean towards Western because of that. This was photographed at Hornsby Bend up near Austin. But again, I'm not sure that that's enough evidence unless this and I think these characteristics here may become the over time may become more reliable. But if there's interbreeding, we'll never know that for sure. And then again, here's a couple more examples just to kind of add to the frustration. So the bottom line, my point here is that it's okay to call it a giant swallowtail. In our area, the smart, scientific best thing to do, unless you can get a sample and do a DNA test, is to call them a giant swallowtail and be happy with that. That's really all you can do. And again, imperfections and bad views often taint what you're able to do. And again, even though here's yellow stripe, yellow stripe, yellow stripe, yellow stripe. So it'll be interesting to see how time flies here. Here are 2 that show the underwing. You'll notice this looks more like a, whoops, let me go back because boy, there now, yeah, that ought to frighten you. This looks like you could draw a straight line here, which would then seem to indicate maybe that this is in fact an Eastern. Okay. This one has what looks like, not quite like this. This might be a Western based on that, except the tail. You could argue this looks spatula. This looks long and narrow. Again, who's to say? And they even looked at the caterpillars. Yikes is all I'm going to say to that, but you can see the variations are very slight for the most part. Of the different instars. These are all the different instars of both species. On this side is Cresfontes, and on this side is, or no, this is Rumico Western. This is Eastern here. Same thing over here versus over here and versus here and here. So we're not going to get into that because that's not what we're chasing. Again, based on those tables, those photographs I just showed you, this that was in my yard sure looked a lot matched up very well with a Rumico, but again, I wouldn't be so pretentious as to go, I know for sure. Okay, now that your heads are spinning, bottom line is, if you see a giant swallowtail, it's a giant swallowtail, okay, for our purposes. The one last butterfly I want to show you is, because it does exist in the area, is the spicebush swallowtail. It has not been documented photographically at Guadalupe River State Park. I did take this picture here at Cibolo Nature Center in Bernie because there is a small population of spicebush trees on the creek. So that butterfly is possible. I looked at the previous plant surveys for Guadalupe River State Park in 1985. They did find spicebush, but there's no mention of where. There's probably a record at UT Austin at the herbarium. But in all the years I worked there, I never ran across a spice bush. If it is there, it's probably very well hidden in Honey Creek. The reason I show you this is because this, instead of being that blue, is kind of a beautiful greenish color. It's a big, slow flying butterfly, really quite beautiful. But again, it's just there, put it in the back of our heads, that if we ever were out there doing a survey and all of a sudden a big black swallowtail flies by that has green on it, it could possibly be a spicebush swallowtail. If you go to East Texas, very, very common. You're going to see it everywhere. All right. Lastly, I want to show you, this is the results of our swallowtail counts during 2025. The only month that we did not have a swallowtail of any kind was January, although in the past we have had a record or two of them, but not in 2025. You can see that they're peak numbers, and here's the number 70 up here. It tends to occur in May. I looked at that, and then I looked at 2020 as another year to look at that had similar results, a similar number of surveys, and that trend, even though the number was higher, it was more around 120, showed that May tends to be the peak. That makes sense. If they're in chrysalis, they come out, they start to emerge in February, and then that first generation is out and about. The ones that survived, they're laying eggs. That next generation, there's more food. They're going to be plentiful. They're going to have a big peak in May. They're going to lay eggs again. You'll start to get overlapping generations probably. And then another peak happens in August and or September. And then they just kind of fade out again. So again, by far the numbers compared with these 5 species, pipevines dominate our surveys. Black swallowtails are always represented, but they usually don't start until April. And we see them all the way into September and even October, and then they kind of start to drop out. We don't see them after that. And they never really, their peak, if you want to call it a peak, is June, July. But again, we just don't see a lot of numbers of those at Guadalupe, I should say. Giant swallowtail, which is this blue color right here. We'll see a few in the spring. And their numbers at the park never seem to get all that big. I always think there should be more of them, but they don't seem to be out there all that much. Tiger swallowtails are even less common. Here's purple right here. We see a little hatch of them in the spring. And then a lot of times we don't see them the rest of the year, even though they're probably out there in small numbers. And the two-tailed is one that just barely shows up. And here this last year, it only showed up in April. Typically, they'll have 2 broods. They'll have a brood here in the springtime and a brood in the fall. But again, because they're big and strong flying, a lot of times we just don't see them during our surveys. But that said, as we go into 2026, we should be watchful of those large yellow butterflies flying over treetops and through the forests and trees. I think we probably miss more than are out there. I think there are more out there than we actually see. I don't know if I said that very right. Anyway, that is what I have for tonight. I know we only talked about a few species of butterflies, but that's exactly the intent that I had for you. The next time we meet, which will be the first Monday of February, same time, same place. We will begin that session with a little refresher identity test. What's that? I heard somebody say something, but I don't know what that was. Anyway, we'll start off with a little test to see how you remember those swallowtails. And then next month, we're going to cover the sulfurs, and there's a whole bunch of them. So we'll take a look at the sulfurs, and then we'll move into each of the groups as we go through the next several months. So I hope that this was beneficial to you all. It was free, so what the heck. I want to thank Jeanette for setting this up, and Robert for suggesting that through her. Appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions or want me to go back to any slides before we wrap things up tonight?
I've got a question for you, Craig. This is Ed.
Sure, Ed.
Any thoughts as to the genetic evolution of our topic today, swallowtails? I know there's a lot of bird watchers in our group, and what I'm trying to get at is the aerodynamics or the physics behind tails in butterflies versus swallowtails in birds, as in tails in a swallow bird or tails in a frigate bird, which make them extremely aerodynamic, yet in butterflies seems to do the opposite.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Ed, and I guess I'm going to go to moths for a potential answer. The Luna moth has those extraordinarily long tails.
Right.
And the thought with them, of course, I think if I'm accurate here, is that those tails may be predatory ways to kind of block the echolocation calls of bats, for example. Um, Maybe a distraction for bird avian predators. Um, the swallowtails, the tails don't seem long enough to make that kind of impact either as a anti-predator thing or an aerodynamic thing. Um,
The the the, re,
um,
the question probably also, and that makes a lot of sense. What you're saying is as to, you're saying for me over the many decades, the classification of papilios or swallowtails have gone from papilio to Betas, Battus, to
right?
Heracles now, and of course some swallowtails have no tails.
No tails, right? Right.
So that's where the thought comes from.
Yeah, it's just it's I you know it's just, I haven't read. I've done a lot of reading, and I just haven't read anything that tells me anything genetically what the advantage of those short tails is for. Um, but if you look at tails on butterflies, the hair streaks have tails. Obviously not to the extent of size, but they seem to get more benefit out of their tails when they're
That's
going,
first
you
peak.
know, it's a completely different thing, right?
Yeah,
And you don't see swallowtails doing that. But for hair streaks, it seems very effective to have those things waving back and forth like false antenna.
yeah.
Um,
Versus
so,
swallowtails, false eyes.
yeah, right. Yeah, on some of them you see that false eye, that like with the giant swallowtails, you see that yellow with the black with the yellow. Um, but it's so variable, and then you get to those species, like you said, that don't have tails at all. So it's like, okay, well, what's that? So I don't know genetically if that's something going away or if it's something expressing itself more now than it did back then. Were the tails longer at some point in the past? Um, I don't know. I don't
Just
know.
a thought. I thought you might know. Yep. Thanks so
Hey,
much.
but that's going to keep me up at night now.
Well, plant that seed on you.
Just
Does
to
anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, just to be clear,
Yes,
next time when
darling.
you did the test, there will be nothing on Western versus Eastern Giant.
No. Although I may throw one up there, I'm expecting
No,
you to say
no, I'm
giant.
just telling you,
Do
there's
it.
not going to be.
Craig, don't forget to hit, I think recording stopped and that should save it. I don't think just turn it off because I'm afraid it won't save it.
Okay, okay, hang on.
Give it a
Let's see
try.
here. Let me see here.
I'm crossing my fingers. Everybody cross fingers.
Hey, there you go. Stop recording. I'm going to stop it now. Are you sure you want to
All
stop
right.
recording